And so one area where, to go back to your question about spreadsheets or more advanced tools, I always like to tell brands, when you're trying to figure out how you want to visualize data, keep it simple. So you have your data, and again, you're looking at a small set of data because you're figuring out what you want to do. It's perfectly okay to say, I'm going to load that into Excel or Google spreadsheets. I'm going to build some charts that help me figure out how do I want to look at this data. Okay. And once you start to figure out, okay, here's how I want to look at this data. Here's how this data becomes useful for me to make a decision. And again, it's the cause and effect that's valuable. Then that's when you can bring in more sophisticated tools, because now you want to look at this data at scale, right? So you bring in technology at that point. But it's okay to start with as Amazon calls it, a more scrappy solution in the beginning. And you definitely want to visualize your data. So typically the order of operation I tell people or brands is, you want to first figure out how you're going to get the data that you need. The second step is going to be, you want to figure out how you're going to visualize that data. Just look at it. And then the third step is you want to understand the relationship between those data points, cause and effect, how changes to one impacts another. And so there's those three steps in the process. And then you want to make sure you have the discipline to do that on a periodic cadence. And that's actually not as easy as it sounds. I think most people will say, yeah, sure, I can look at my data every week. It's very easy not to prioritize it, and it's very easy to go down the path of focusing on just the output that you can't do anything about.
Yeah, you know how it is. I always say this. So when you have ideas, it's easy to talk about the ideas. And then as soon as, and this could be a creative situation, like you want to make a painting, or you want to write a novel or whatever. You can talk about it in your head. The ideas come to your head and you can talk about it, but say, okay, let's not do it. The minute that you put pen to paper, forget it. It's a non-starter, right? So okay, how is this going to translate into what I want it to do? I mean, I know this is what I want to do, but it's too many moving parts and too many things. And then let's assume that you finally overcome that, and eventually you do, and you start doing it, and you put exactly what you had in your mind as much as possible, as close as possible, on the paper, or doing some kind of a tool, and you look at it, well, that's not really what I had in mind. When it comes out at the end, looks totally different, right? So it's not easy. It's never easy. It's easy for us to talk here. So that's why I want to get into the specifics. It's very hard visualizing data. Okay, what kind of visualization? Is it a pie chart? Is it a bar chart? And you don't know, because you can see different things from each one, right?
Well, a couple of things, right? I always say that an idea is worth nothing. It's the execution that matters. And that's one of the things that Amazon does really well, by the way. So yes, you have to have an idea, but like you said, you actually have to start executing on them. And that's where you said, put paper to pencil. It's important because oftentimes, like you said, the idea that you have is, as you actually start executing it, will change. And that's okay. In fact, you should embrace that as a brand, because it means, ideally, it means that it's changing because you're bringing in factors that you weren't considering when you were only thinking about it, right? And so that's why I say, like, you really want to focus on figuring out what are the decisions you want to make. And you want to start as quickly as you can. So you want to go from the idea phase to the execution phase. You want to do that in a very lightweight method, which is why you don't want to start thinking about the scaling first. You don't want to think about the tech in the beginning. You want to think about, let me do this really quickly. Let me see what it turns out to look like. And then once I know what it's going to look like, now I'm ready to scale really quickly. Yeah. And so we go back to like a simple example of like price elasticity, right? The first thing you want to do as a brand is you want to get your sales data from the e-commerce platforms. And then you want to keep track of what your price was for each SKU over time when you changed it. And you want to, first of all, the first thing I would do is I would plot that. I would have a chart that shows my sales velocity, my sales per day, units per day, with pricing. And you're going to see some sort of curve. That curve that you're seeing is going to tell you what your elasticity is, how a change in price will change your sales velocity. Then you look at your sales velocity and you look at your inventory. You can plot those and you can figure out, okay, given this sales velocity, I'm going to run out of inventory in X amount of time, or I have this amount of inventory in hand, this many days. Now you've started to tie changes to price with how long your inventory will last. And this is simple to do in a spreadsheet, right? Anybody can do this.
Very easy. Well,
But once you start getting more data and you start to scale, that's when you say, okay, now you know what you want to do. Let's take it out of the spreadsheets. Let's bring it into a more sophisticated tool.